Tonight, the US president is courted by Europe and likened to a daddy as world leaders meet.
Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No? He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
NATO leaders agreed to raise their defense spending to 5% of GDP within 10 years. Donald Trump described that as a monumental win, insisted again that US jets had obliterated Tehran's nuclear capabilities, and confirmed possible talks with Iran next week. No more missiles over Tehran. Now Israel renews its focus on Gaza, with dozens more deaths reported today.
Now, as war darkens our skies, we feel it again. Sorrow for the innocent, hope for the fall of the tormentors.
A love letter to Iran on day 2 of a fragile ceasefire. I'll speak live to an Iranian-born actress about her hopes for her country. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening from Jerusalem. I'm Yalda Hakim. A man of strength and a man of peace. That's how the US president was described today by the head of NATO Defense Alliance. If Donald Trump were to write the script for how he'd like to be received by world leaders in Europe, this is exactly what he would have wanted. A so-called ironclad commitment from all member states to spend 5% of their GDP on defence by 2035. Fawning words effectively describing him as the world's daddy, the authority figure who tells off naughty children in the playground until they have no choice but to play nicely.
We had a great victory there, and we then came here, and I think we had a great victory here, but this is an ongoing project. This is the safety of Europe, the safety of the world.
And it's this role as peacemaker that Mr. Trump is so keen to preserve. It's why, flanked by his Secretary of State and his Defense Secretary, he continues to insist that US jets did obliterate Iran's nuclear capabilities, no matter what early intelligence suggests. Have a listen.
If you want to make an assessment of what happened at Fordo, you better get a big shovel and go really deep, because Iran's nuclear program is obliterated.
Today, he confirmed that the US and Iran would hold talks next week. That's after American jets dropped bunker-busting bombs on Iran, and Tehran sent missiles towards a US airbase in Qatar. A superficial peace now restored, but at what risk? What are the long-term implications for the region? What now for the future of Iran and its nuclear program? We'll discuss all of that tonight, but let's begin with our first report from our security and defense editor, Deborah Haynes.
That's the picture we want. Yeah.
A brush with Dutch royalty and plenty of smiles. This is a NATO summit of 32 allies, but really, it's all about one man, Donald Trump, or Daddy. The NATO chief cast him as a father figure while he was talking about Israel's war with Iran.
And Daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while you have to use a certain word.
The Middle East is clearly on his mind. But the meeting here in The Hague is about European security. In particular, a need for Europe and Canada to show Donald Trump they're relying less on the US to protect them and doing more to defend themselves. It's why they agreed to a new target to spend 5% of GDP on defence and security. The pledge was then framed as a big win for Mr. Trump that only he could have secured.
Is this the way that you feel that you have to act when doing business with the US president, through flattery and praise? Isn't it a bit demeaning, and doesn't it make you look weak?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a bit of a question of taste, but I think he's a good friend. And when he is doing stuff which is forcing us to, for example, when it comes to making more investments, so doesn't he deserve some praise?
Before the summit, the US president sounded unsure about the need to defend his allies. By the end, though, their charm offensive appeared to have worked.
Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No? He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Do you regard your NATO allies, though, as kind of like children, and they're obviously listening to you and they're spending more, and you're obviously appreciative of that, but do you hope that actually they're going to be able to defend themselves, defend Europe on their own?
I think they need help a little bit at the beginning, and I think they'll be able to, and I think they're going to remember this day. And this is a big day for NATO.
Do you think they can do it without you, though, in the future? Can they do it without
Well, ask Mark.
States?
I mean, you have to ask Mark, okay?
Mark Rutte would doubtless say no.
Thank you very much, dear Mark.
Also needing US support is Ukraine. The Ukrainian president met with European allies on the sidelines of the summit. He spoke with Mr. Trump too. But securing a ceasefire to end Russia's war in Ukraine is something that has so far even eluded the daddy. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, The Hague.
Well, Donald Trump went on the defensive as he faced questions about the effectiveness of those strikes on Iran's nuclear program. A leaked intelligence report has suggested the attack only delayed Iran's progress by a matter of months. So if America failed in its mission to, in Trump's words, obliterate Tehran's nuclear ambitions, then what might be the consequences for the region and back home in the United States? Our US correspondent David Blevins reports.
The B-2 bombers returned, leaving questions hanging in the air. But the success of their strikes isn't one of them, according to the president, who's confirmed fresh talks with Iran.
We're going to talk to them next week with Iran. We may sign an agreement. I don't know. We want no nuclear, but we destroyed the nuclear. In other words, that's destroyed. I said, Iran will not have nuclear. Well, we blew it up. It's blown up. To kingdom come.
The administration is closely scrutinising these images, before and after shots from Fordo and Iran's other nuclear facilities. Mission accomplished, says the White House. Iran's nuclear ambitions only set back by months, says a leaked report from the Pentagon.
If you want to make an assessment of what happened at Fordo, you better get a big shovel and go really deep, because Iran's nuclear program is obliterated. And somebody somewhere is trying to leak something to say, oh, with low confidence, we think maybe it's moderate. Those that drop the bombs precisely in the right place know exactly what happened when that exploded. And you know who else knows? Iran.
What do they think in the corridors of Congress? It depends who you ask.
I flew 39 combat missions in the first Gulf War.
Senator Mark Kelly has seen the report.
What do you think when President Trump uses the term obliterated?
Well, he's just saying that because he wants that to be the narrative. He said it the night of the strike, without any information, without even satellite imagery, and certainly without any information about what happened underneath 200 feet of rock and granite and dirt. The likelihood of something underground like that being obliterated is incredibly low.
The president has said there will be talks between the US and Iran.
Great.
That there is a ceasefire. What do you expect those talks to deliver?
I mean, ultimately, we would want to deliver something like the plan that Donald Trump tore up in 2018. That should be his goal.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The success of a military operation has become a battle of political messaging. And that's going to last longer than a 12-day war, because the truth lies buried, quite literally, deep underground. It's been an uphill struggle, from airstrikes to a fragile ceasefire to more talks with Iran. There's always unfinished business when you're the President of the United States. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Joining me now is General Joseph Votel, former commander of US Central Command and senior distinguished fellow at the Middle East Institute. Thank you so much, General, for joining us here again on the programme. I just want to get your take on, the way that this assessment around the BDA is now done. It feels very much like it has been politicised from all sides. Just help our audience understand the sort of intelligence gathering process. It feels like, from everything that we're hearing from everyone, they're looking at it as though it's a snapshot. But from my understanding, intelligence is more a process.
That's right, and it's really good to be with you again. So I think we have to think about battle damage assessment exactly as you described, as a process. There are certain observations we can make right after we conduct a strike. Certainly we know that the munitions hit where they are intended to hit. We know the capabilities of the munitions, so we can make some assessment of that. So that's kind of the initial assessment. Then we begin to get some imagery so we can look at the sites we struck, and we can begin to draw more conclusions for that. But the third phase of battle damage assessment is really the most important one, and this is the one when we look at the total system damage assessment. And this is where we try to gather information from as many sources as we can, not just the United States intelligence community agencies like imagery or signals or MASINT or HUMINT, but we also talk to the Israelis. We also talk to international organizations like the IAEA. We try to get insights from people who have been on the ground, so we have a much more fulsome picture of that. And what I'm afraid of is that we have not allowed that process to work. I don't know. I haven't seen the draft report that was supposedly leaked or let out, so I don't know what it actually says. But it's not helpful to providing a complete assessment of what actually happened. And I suspect in the days and perhaps weeks ahead, we're going to know much more as we get people on the ground and actually can assess the damage that may have been caused by these strikes.
Yeah, I was speaking to General Petraeus yesterday, who said, look, it's just too early to tell. And, for those who are saying it's a complete success, too early to tell. And those who are saying it's not, again, too early to tell at this stage.
That's right. I think in this case, I know it's unsatisfying to people to not know right away, because that's kind of the culture we live in. But the fact of the matter is that battle damage assessment is both science and art, and we have to take the time to get it right. And that's what I think our professionals in the intelligence community and at the Pentagon and at CENTCOM are trying to do. And I think we just have to be a little bit more patient to get a good full assessment of what happened.
General, help us understand the MOP, these massive ordnance penetrators and the actual bombs. Are they able to do the sort of damage that we're talking about? Is that what they were built to do? And have they been sufficiently tested? I know they've been tested in places like Texas, but, was this the first time, I guess, that it's used on such a facility?
Well, it is the first time that these munitions have been operationally employed. We began to design these in the late 2010s after we learned about what Iran was doing. And of course, at the same time, we had challenges with North Korea, who was in the process of developing nuclear munitions like this. And so the Department of Defense undertook an effort to develop these massive ordnance penetrators that could get down at deeply buried underground facilities and cause significant damage and destroy them. So these are purpose-built munitions. They've been tested. They've been tested in a variety of locations in our country, and whether that replicates exactly the geography of the areas that we're dropping in right now, I really can't make a determination on that. But I do know they've been rigorously tested, and we do know what the effects of those are. The way the munition operates is it's made of special steel alloy. It drops from a very high altitude. It penetrates, and then when the munition comes to a stop, is when the 5,000 pounds of explosive actually explode. So it's likely that these would have penetrated certainly tens to hundreds of feet into the ground before the explosion took place, which I think is what gives some confidence that we've been able to achieve the effects at these underground facilities.
General Votel, it's really good to talk to you and get your expertise and insights on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Well, let's go straight to our US correspondent, Mark Stone, who joins us live and was listening in. Mark, so much discussion at the moment. Just listening there to General Votel, General Petraeus yesterday. They're all almost erring on the side of caution. Look, let's just wait. This is a process. But of course, in the age that we live in, and even the off-the-record conversations I'm having with Israelis and Americans, they're sort of saying this whole thing has become politicized because, frankly, the media, politicians want answers now.
Yeah, and also because Donald Trump is a man who... Oh, I can hear myself back in my ear if someone can fix that. I'm going to turn my volume down. Donald Trump is a man who likes to claim things are true before he's actually got the facts. And so in a sort of bombastic way, he said they have been completely obliterated. Yalda, it's turned into an almighty row here and in NATO. And the track that the Trump administration is taking is to blame the media and almost, well, not almost, but to call them unpatriotic for even suggesting that somehow this was a military failure, kind of saying you're blaming the pilots, when actually the reality is what the media is doing is pointing out what this leak says, which is that it may not have been quite as conclusive and as obliterated as Donald Trump is claiming. But now he's on social media saying, for example, in a way that only he would, that the journalist who leaked it at CNN should be fired from CNN. I watch her doing the fake news. She should be immediately reprimanded and so on. So says Donald Trump. But what is clear is, as you said, no one can make judgments for sure at this time. Over time, we are going to get clearer and clearer judgment. And what is interesting is that late last night, from the Institute of Science and International Security, more analysis. Now, this is interesting because this institute is run by the former head of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, David Albright. And it comes to an interesting conclusion, having looked in very great detail with a lot of experts at the satellite imagery, and I'll read you the key quote. It says, overall, Israel's and US attacks have effectively destroyed Iran's centrifuge enrichment program. It will be a long time before Iran comes anywhere near the capability it had before the attack. And it goes on to say, that being said, there are residuals such as stocks of 60%, 20%, and 3 to 5% enriched uranium, and the centrifuges manufactured but not yet installed at Natanz and Fordo. These non-destroyed parts pose a threat as they can be used in the future to produce weapons-grade uranium. So that there, the view of a very well-respected man, David Albright, who was once the head of the agency that knows better than anyone else when a country has got a weapons-grade nuclear program. So interesting stuff there. But as you said, it's going to take time.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, what's been extraordinary for us, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, just, we've had 13 days of attacks, tit-for-tat attacks here in the Middle East, and Donald Trump sort of declared it all mission accomplished, got on that plane, swore at both sides and arrived in NATO, and it feels like such a hard, sudden turn, the sort of a gear change, and the world's attention has sort of shifted in that direction and away from the extraordinary events here of the last 13 days.
Yeah, but those events, they are hanging over him. I can still hear myself back, sorry. Those events are clearly hanging over him, and it is clearly the case that he wanted a quick fix, and he's got that, They are not fighting, and he must be given credit for the fact that his power, his ability to pick up phones and get people to stop doing stuff, or indeed to do stuff if that's what he wants them to do, is remarkable. But it is also the case that this conflict is not solved, far from it. He has got a quick short-term fix. And the news conference today was fascinating because behind all the the hoo-ha over whether or not the weapons, the nuclear weapons have been destroyed or not, or the uranium's been destroyed and the centrifuges, was this announcement by Trump, first time we've heard it, that indeed next week they are going to talk to the Iranians. Now, is this true? Have the Iranians agreed to that? We don't know, but maybe it's just the Trump tactic of jumping someone into something, telling the Iranians we're going to talk even though they haven't agreed to it, and then if they don't turn up, he can blame the Iranians. So that we'll see where that goes. But if they are going to talk, well, maybe there is progress. Maybe he's going to get somewhere. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, we've just got some breaking news that's just come in the last few minutes, which I'm going to bring to our audience. There's a statement that's come in from the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, about the intelligence on Iran's nuclear program. And as we've been saying, the whole issue has been completely politicized. But he has issued a statement, and I'm just going to read it to you. It says, the CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by the recent targeted strikes. This includes new intelligence from a historically reliable and accurate source method that several key Iranian nuclear facilities were destroyed and would have to be rebuilt over the course of years. CIA continues to collect additional reliably sourced information to keep appropriate decision makers and oversight bodies fully informed. When possible, we will also provide updates and information to the American public, given the national importance of this matter in every attempt to provide transparency. So a statement there from the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, about the intelligence on Iran's nuclear program. So that for the last few days, there's been a lot of chatter around the battle damage assessment. There were military intelligence leaks to the press, which pointed to the idea that perhaps these attacks, these strikes, weren't as successful as Donald Trump had portrayed them to be. And don't forget, the US president had said that the Iranian nuclear facilities and sites had been completely obliterated. And that is something that he has continued to reinforce over the past few days through his defense secretary as well, and himself personally today at the NATO summit. So a statement there from the director of the CIA. Well, Donald Trump claimed much of the credit for brokering a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, while the EU has faced accusations its influence over Tehran has waned. Well, earlier, the Vice President of the European Commission, Kaja Kallas, joined me from the NATO summit. I asked if the bloc had been sidelined. Have a listen.
No, we got the Iranians to the table. We were discussing, different issues that we have. So we are of the view that this requires a diplomatic solution, and it still requires a diplomatic solution because, of course, one is the nuclear program that is of concern, but we also have other worries with Iran when it comes to their hybrid attacks against European countries, when it comes to the European citizens being detained by Iran, when it comes to their support to Russia in the war against Ukraine. So there are many issues that we are able to talk to Iran, and Iran was also open to discuss the broader security issues.
Well, it didn't feel like President Trump was paying any attention to what the Europeans were doing, whether it was the statements that you guys were issuing or the meetings you had with the Iranian foreign minister.
Well, clearly he operates in a different way, but that doesn't take away the fact that every conflict ends in a diplomatic solution. And as we have issues in addition to the nuclear, and by the way, the nuclear as well, we need to sit down and discuss. Like we had the JCPOA with Iran, that was clear. Also, things got better, but then, of course, America left the JCPOA, and now we are in this situation where we are. Iran is weakened, but there are many issues that still worry us, and we need to find a diplomatic solution, and there Europe definitely has a role to play.
There are big questions now about the battle damage assessment, leaks to the press about whether the kind of destruction that Donald Trump is talking about may not have taken effect, the kind of heavy damage that he's saying took place at these facilities. Are you worried now that Iran will now almost make a dash for the bomb? Perhaps if they weren't before, they will do that now. And we're also hearing that the Iranian parliament is looking to approve a bill where they will no longer cooperate with the IAEA.
Well, that's why it's very urgent that we sit down and have a diplomatic solution. That the experts monitoring the programs from the International Atomic Energy Association will get the access to the facilities, and we know what is going on. I think this is showing that we need to really sit down and have an agreement before they do anything that is extremely dangerous, like leaving the non-proliferation treaty.
Do you believe that President Trump violated international law by proceeding with these airstrikes on the nuclear facilities?
Well, the international law provides two cases where you can use power. One is for self-defense, and the other one is for with the UN Security Council resolution. So whoever uses force also has to justify that is under international law, doable.
So do you believe that those two requirements were met? I mean, did the United States do this for self-defense? We certainly didn't see any kind of UN resolution.
Well, it is up to United States, who has used the force, to justify on which grounds they did that. It's not up to the others to say.
And Kaja Kallas, I just want to ask about President Trump's trip to where you are. As he made that trip there, he cast doubt around Article 5 and standing with NATO allies should they come under any kind of attack. I know that he has now said that he will stand with other NATO partners, but are you concerned about this level of flipping and flopping?
Well, Article 5 is very clear, and parties of the treaty are the countries, which is that America, the United States of America, is one of the allies who has said that Article 5 is ironclad. And let me recall that the only time that Article 5 was actually used was when America called that they are under attack, and the country where I'm from, Estonia, went to this war together with the United States because we are allies in NATO. We had more combat casualties per capita in that war than, for example, America had. So I think we have shown, allies have shown that we are there for America, and I'm sure that the United States of America is sticking to its obligations under the treaties.
That was Kaja Kallas there. Let's just return to that developing story now and that statement from the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe. He says a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by the recent targeted strikes. Let's bring in our Mark Stone again just to assess this. Mark, as we've been saying, this whole issue has been politicized over the course of the last few days. We've now got the CIA director saying that the CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates that the Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by the recent targeted strikes.
Yes, this is an attempt, I think, to draw a line under the issue. It's very rare for the director of the CIA to release a statement like this. CIA directors tend to keep a very low profile given the nature of the job. But this was posted on the CIA website a short time ago, and the director posted it on his own X account with the attachment saying, my statement confirming CIA intelligence which contradicts illegally sourced public reporting regarding the destruction of key Iranian nuclear facilities. So what the Trump administration is trying to do, and of course a director Radcliffe is a Trump appointee. What he is trying to do is draw a line under this this debate now and effectively say, look, we've got really good confidence that actually we did do a great deal of damage, but let's wait and see. Let's let all the different agencies do their work, and then we will be able to prove to you that in fact we were right. And what we've heard over the course of the day is that yes, and Donald Trump didn't disagree, that the leak that came out may well have been accurate, but in a very narrow setting. And you have to look at the body of evidence more widely. And as I said a moment ago, the former director of the IAEA, he has conducted with his team very, very detailed satellite analysis of satellite imagery, which comes to a similar conclusion to the CIA, who of course have access to a far greater amount of information, including Israeli intelligence. And we know that the Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, they will have people on the ground as well. So all of this is going to take a long time, but an attempt there by the Trump administration through the CIA director to draw a line under this and say, look, we're confident, but wait, we will have the full details in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much. Well, we've been talking a lot about Iran's nuclear ambitions, but as part of efforts to rearm Britain and make the country war-ready, the Prime Minister has confirmed the UK is to buy F-35 stealth jets capable of carrying US nuclear warheads. It will allow the Royal Air Force to carry such weapons for the first time since the 1990s. Well, let's just take a look. The UK will buy 12 F-35s, which are multi-role stealth combat jets, specifically the A variant. It already flies the B variant. This version of the jet is capable of carrying nuclear weapons. Weapons like the American-owned and made B-61 tactical nuclear bombs. The UK will have to ask for permission from the US before they are fired. In combination with the existing nuclear deterrent, they will increase in the UK's nuclear capacity. The country relies on its at-sea deterrent Trident, a much more powerful strategic nuclear weapon carried on Vanguard-class submarines. It's what makes the UK one of 3 NATO members with nuclear capability. The others are the US and France. The government is calling this move the biggest strengthening of the UK's nuclear posture in a generation.
The ability for us to say, not only do we have this increased capacity, but we can move our jets much more visibly than you can move a submarine, because the submarines, for very obvious reasons, need to be quite secret and hidden. So you can message, you can match escalation with Russia, and you can get to the point where we're deterring a war.
Luke Pollard there. Well, that's, as I said, the Defence Minister speaking to our Sophie Ridge a little earlier. The confirmation of the F-35s was timed to coincide with the NATO Leaders Summit. Let's bring in our Security and Defence Editor, Deborah Haynes, who spoke to Donald Trump at The Hague and joins me live tonight. Deborah, I'm going to ask you about your daddy question in a moment, but I just want to ask you about the F-35s because, of course, for the Prime Minister, for Britain, it's all been for the last few months about getting Britain war ready, and it's also been part of the defence review. So I guess this kind of, investing in the right military hardware and equipment is all part of that.
It is, but it does also raise questions about where the money is coming from and when is it going to actually arrive. There's no indication at all from anything that's been said by the Prime Minister, his Defence Secretary or his Chancellor to indicate that even though at this summit there's been this huge pledge to increase defence spending for the whole of the alliance, the UK is still not going to be changing anything in terms of additional funding until the next Parliament and beyond that. And so the speed is really key. Baltic allies, for example, think the 10-year time frame for achieving this new goal of 5% of GDP on defence is way too slow. And just on the F-35 decision as well, yes, these jets are capable of carrying nuclear bombs, but it doesn't mean that the UK itself is going to be expanding its nuclear arsenal. Instead, the Prime Minister said that these aircraft would be given to join a NATO mission that is part of the NATO deterrent posture, and they carry American bombs, airborne nuclear bombs, and they include Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, all countries that have F-35, so the UK would be part of that mission.
Deborah, you had that extraordinary exchange with President Trump where you asked him whether he was the daddy of the alliance. He seemed to quite enjoy getting that question. But I guess if we look at it, on a wider level, any sort of commitments to Ukraine? I know that President Trump met with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines. Has anything come out of that?
No, not really. Nothing obvious in terms of the public statements, at least. But what has been very clear is that the allies have been bending over themselves to fawn and praise Donald Trump. They know that they need the Americans to stay inside the alliance and be committed to that Article 5 principle of collective defence. And probably the most toe-curling moment was when Mark Rutte was sitting down with Donald Trump, and they were talking about, or Donald Trump was talking about the moves he's been making to end the 12-day war, as he calls it, between Iran and Israel. And Mark Rutte then called him the daddy. And so then it kind of really raises the obvious question of whether he sees himself as the daddy for all of his NATO allies. I thought the response, though, was interesting, how he talked about the fact that the US is still needed to help secure Europe, because I was really wanting to know whether he thinks that his children, when they grow up and defend themselves, can do it on their own, and clearly he doesn't think that's the case.
Deborah, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. And in this week's episode of the World Podcast, my co-host Richard Engel and I react to Donald Trump's outburst on the White House lawn as that shaky ceasefire between Israel and Iran holds. I told Richard about the dramatic moment Donald Trump intervened in a planned Israeli airstrike on Iran at the last minute. Just have a listen.
So apparently dozens of Israeli fighter jets were hovering ominously over the skies of Iran. Donald Trump rings Benjamin Netanyahu and says, "What are you doing?" Benjamin Netanyahu says, "I'm sorry, I've already green-lit it. I can't stop it." And Donald Trump says, "You better not drop a single bomb on Iran. Stop this right now. Stop the operation." So then what happens? The jets were ordered to come back. And as a symbolic gesture, they basically drop one single bomb, not on any kind of strategic position, but basically as a symbolic move to send a message to Iran, look, if you try this again, we will come back. I think what's extraordinary about this moment is it feels like the first time in perhaps 40 years that a US president has shown that in some way he can rein in an Israeli leader.
And you can watch listen to the full episode of the World Podcast, wherever you get your podcast, Apple or Spotify. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, I'll speak to Iranian-born actor and activist Nazanin Bunyadi about what the recent conflict in the Middle East means for the future of Iran.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome back. The daily threat of Israeli bombs being dropped from the skies looks to have subsided for the people of Iran, but the tension and sense of anxiety lingers on. For those born in Tehran, there is a sense of apprehension about what comes next. In a moment, I'll speak live to the Iranian-born actress Nazanin Bunyadi, but first she shared some thoughts on her homeland and whether her family may ever return after fleeing the country back in 1979. Have a look.
Do you think I'll get to see Iran again? The question hangs in the air. Quiet, fragile, heavy with longing. My father asks it in the twilight of his life, as he battles the cancer that seeks to weaken him. It's not his voice alone I hear, but the echo of millions, those who fled the land they loved and those who remain behind, still waiting for the day Iran might be Iran again. I grew up between the nostalgia of a homeland lost and the reality of exile. The chants outside the Islamic Republic embassy, the clatter of Persian tea glasses at gatherings of dissidents in our cramped government housing, the news of bombings and assassinations that stole friends and fellow dreamers. That haunting blend of sorrow and defiance shaped us. And now, as war darkens our skies, we feel it again. Sorrow for the innocent, hope for the fall of the tormentors.
They were the words of Nazanin Bunyadi, and she joins me now. Nazanin, it's always really good to see you, and I could hear the pain and torment in your voice there. But just tell me and give me your reaction over the events of the last 12 or 13 days.
Thank you for having me, Yalda. I think what started off 12 days ago with this paradox, this feeling of despair, but also hope at the fall of the tormentors, as I said in that piece, has turned now into a combination of fear and anger. Because the Iranian people once again feel like their lives are being politicized. We have collectively only really focused on the nuclear issue on an international level. And once again, human rights and the rights of the people of Iran have fallen by the wayside. As long as we, the international community, don't understand that there needs to be an accountable and representative government inside Iran for there to be sustainable, substantive peace, not only in Iran and the region, but for the world, then we're missing the point, and we're continuing to only treat the symptoms of the problem with Iran and not the root cause, which is this regime itself.
Do you believe that then regime change should have been forced?
No, I don't. And nobody, to my knowledge, the vast majority of Iranians want self-determination. But what we've done, with this haphazard foreign policy, this inconsistent and volatile way of dealing with Iran has not helped the issue. In the past 12 days, 15 people have been executed, 3 of whom have been accused of spying for Israel. Repression has intensified. There is the harshest internet crackdown since the Bloody November protests of 2019. And all that to say that the wrath of the Islamic Republic turns first and foremost to its own people, the Iranian people. And so what this war has essentially done is it's weakened the regime, unleashed their wrath. We've poked the bear, essentially. And now we're left with a regime that has survived, but it has survived and is angered, and it's turning that anger inward on its own people. And behind the cloak of this internet crackdown, and with the increased repression, how are Iranians supposed to organize? How are they supposed to claim their own destiny? And that's really all we've been asking for. We need a consistent foreign policy that empowers the people and disempowers the regime, turning away from US soft power in the form of defunding institutions like the National Endowment for Democracy or Voice of America Persian has not helped the issue. And then following that, we have sort of started this conflict in a way that we're not really seeing it through to fruition. And what I mean by that is not continuing to bomb. What I mean by that is standing unequivocally by the Iranian people. None of this really makes sense to them. They're scared. They're running from the regime in this moment, and they're saying, where are you? The messages I'm getting from Iran are a mix of, please don't leave us in this moment. It's only going to get worse. And how are we supposed to organize? How are we supposed to take to the streets? And how are we supposed to oppose this regime in this moment?
Nazanin, I wonder what your assessment is of Israel's actions, because there's a lot of criticism around the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi for not condemning the Israeli bombings, which has left more than 700 Iranians dead as well. And we've seen terrified Iranians fleeing their cities, their homes. We saw the column of cars. We've seen people like poets and, teachers and activists killed in their homes as a result of the bombings. And Israel, I'm currently in Jerusalem, and I've spoken to Israeli officials who have said we're not targeting these civilians, but the fact is they have been getting killed.
I mean, this to me, as a human rights activist, I have never wanted war, and I don't want war. In fact, the whole reason we have said empower the people and disempower the regime was because we felt that this moment was going to come if we don't do that. I've always been opposed to war, and I think that the consensus inside Iran, and this is just, we have to be honest here about who the Iranian people are blaming. And the truth is the vast majority of the people inside Iran oppose the Islamic Republic, and they feel, and I can't, of course, speak for all of them because Iran is not a monolith, but the people I'm talking to, the prominent dissidents, civil society leaders, feel very strongly that this war was the cause of this war was nuclear brinkmanship, something that isn't a priority to the Iranian people. This is not the Iranian people's war. They have become collateral for this regime. The regime hides behind the Iranian people. They invoke a sense of nationalism when it suits them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nazanin, we're always grateful to hear from you and your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Yalda.
Well, while much of the world's attention has focused on Iran and Israel, the war in Gaza claimed dozens more lives today. Health officials in the enclave are reporting the deaths of 79 people. 33 of them reportedly died while trying to access aid. Meanwhile, Israel's military says 7 of its troops have been killed. The IDF claims a Palestinian attacker attached a bomb to their armoured vehicle, leading to one of the deadliest days for the army in months. Our correspondent Tom Cheshire has this next report.
Every day in the very early morning, thousands of Palestinians make this journey. They do so knowing they are walking into what a UN official has described as a death trap. But they are desperate for food, so they risk it.
I'm really thanking God I managed to get this bag. I have to feed 15 people. We've been trying for 3 months. Thank God I made it. I went back and forth to that area 10 times. Near the tanks, near the Israelis, through intense gunfire. Thank God.
Many were not so lucky this morning. The wounded were taken to Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. The dead were laid out on the floor. Hundreds of people have been killed trying to get food at distribution points, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. The aid stations are operated by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a private organisation backed by Israel and now funded directly by the US too. The IDF did not respond to our questions on this latest incident, but told Sky News the Ministry of Health in Gaza is controlled and directed by Hamas and is therefore subject to its agenda. In consequence, as has been proved and demonstrated repeatedly, The data of the ministry is replete with inconsistencies and false determinations. The spectacular aerial conflict between Israel and Iran may have ended. But the relentless ground-level grind of the Gaza war has continued all the while. This was yesterday in Jalas street camp in the middle of the region. The IDF also announced the death of 7 soldiers, killed by an explosive device. The end of the Iran war means Israel is now focusing more military resources on Gaza, but it also means there may be a new path to peace, as Donald Trump suggested at today's NATO summit. In the dark pre-dawn, on empty stomachs and aching feet, it is death that is close by. Tom Cheshire, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Whether it's the tensions between Israel and Iran or the war in Gaza, conflict displaces millions of people in the most severe and dramatic ways. The United Nations says there's now 122 million forcibly displaced people worldwide. This week, I spoke with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi. He started by discussing the recent tensions between Israel and Iran. Have a listen.
This is the pattern that unfortunately we see in all conflicts. Think of Gaza. Think of Congo, think of Sudan, of Myanmar, and all over the world. We've just put out our yearly report on refugees, and yet again, after, it's been 10 years, year after year, the number of refugees and displaced has increased, again, to now 122 million. And this is really a sign of the times. And again, this new conflict, same patterns, inevitably it causes displacement.
You also mentioned Gaza there, and of course, again, if you speak as a humanitarian, the situation there is dire. The focus of the world right now is with this war between Israel and Iran, but people are struggling to get basic food. There is even a water shortage there at the moment. We have been continuing our coverage of the situation in Gaza, and it feels relentless, like there is no end in sight.
And again, civilians, as we see on screens every day, are impacted in the most cruel fashion. I think that all these situations that cross each other demonstrate one point, that international humanitarian law is important and needs to be upheld by everybody in war.
And finally, Filippo, you said you started your role 10 years ago, and you have about 6 months left in your tenure in your current role. What lessons would you say that you've learned that perhaps the international community should learn when it comes to refugees, the movement of people, and what can be done differently?
I think that I have covered this role during a decade of growing problems, growing challenges, more conflicts, more violations of human rights, more violations of international humanitarian law in situations of war, as I have described, and more hostility also, dictated mostly by political reasons towards refugees, migrants, other people on the move. So that has been a big challenge. And I hope that we can continue to engage ourselves to counter these negative trends. But I would say that the other big lesson is that when you have a situation like Syria, and I am here in a place where we have a chance to have refugees who can stop being refugees and be back in their country, rebuilding their country. I think when you have these opportunities, it is important to take some risks and invest in the recovery and reconstruction. We had that chance in Sudan, if you remember, a few years back when the previous regime fell. I think I could observe the timidity of the international community in investing in the future of Sudan, and look at where we're now. Civil war, 14 million refugees and displaced, and even bigger crisis than Syria. So the big lesson of this year is when we have an opportunity, let's not waste it. There are still ways to get out of conflict and into a more prosperous and peaceful future for some populations. Let's not let them go away without grabbing them.
Filippo Grandi there. Well, away from the Middle East, Amnesty International in Kenya are reporting that another 16 people have died in anti-government protests. More than 80 others were injured today and required medical treatment. Human rights groups say protests have been taking place against police brutality and poor governance. The marches took place exactly a year after a huge demonstration descended into violence, leaving 60 people dead. Well, just bringing you back to the situation here in the Middle East, we've had an extraordinary 13 days where we saw Israel launch airstrikes over the skies of Tehran, killing their top commanders and damaging, destroying their nuclear facilities and military sites. Then, of course, the United States got involved. We now have seen a fragile ceasefire in place. We will continue to monitor the developments here from the region. But from me and the team here on the ground, good night.